Thank you, Tree. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this last panel of our conference during 4 days. The title of this panel is Urbanity and Governance in Brazil. As you can see, we have one presentation pre-recorded, and we have also a live presentation by Luisa Gomez, and we have the last one by Sierra from Germany. And we will start with the recorded presentation, then we'll move to Luisa's presentation, and at the end, the presentation of Sierra. Then we will have a session for discussion, questions.
Hello, my name is Elena Kilina. I'm a researcher from Russia, based in Brazil. So I would like here to present my presentation called Place and Play in Urbanity of China and Brazil. And shortly I would say that, yes, I was doing my research, finishing my PhD research in University of Campinas in Brazil. And it's about China and Brazil. So I spent also 5 years in Shanghai doing field work and different collaboration with Tunzi University and Fudan University. And my research is interdisciplinary topic, including social science, urban and cultural anthropology, methods of visual anthropology, urbanism, sinology, and I'm using also artistic practice as photography and sound for as additional methods for the research. So here, I would like just to say that a focus of my presentation today is to just give you a shortly a bit of details of these 2 case studies I'm doing in terms of my topics, 2 case studies in São Paulo and in Shanghai, and it's, as I called, urban anthropology research. With the elements of interdisciplinary methods, where include affordances, notion of the place and space. I'm given this concept of state of play and urban play at the end, together with this knowledge of urbanity. And this research intends through a visual analysis to reveal day-to-day uses that people make of the space and how these become places with different meanings for different people on a different occasion, and that it's attributes to the emergence of considerable variety forms of play. And for me, the crucial point is to document this urban vitality of residents' interaction with the place where they live. So this parallel analysis I'm trying to do along with the research, right, to understand what is play, to understand what play as interaction, right, what the value and production of the place and space, and where this human condition in the urban framework corresponding to landscape and to leisure. So there are 2 case studies at Parque Minhocão in São Paulo and Shanghai Hongfang, a red town in Shanghai. And all this visual data, all the visual photo, all the visuals, the photography and videos you will see in my presentation all made by me during different field works I did in São Paulo and in Shanghai. So these 2 case studies. So shortly, Parque Minhocão is a highway which is built in 2017, and then it started to have this. It's quite a downtown area. Basically, you can see here. Yeah, downtown area connects the 4 main zones in São Paulo, and from 70 they started to talk about this. A way to combine it with being at a public place. So in 19, they already started to close traffic on Sundays. Then there was big discussion between urbanists, architects, activists, and people involved in the city development, to close it for the weekends. And in 2013, there was a group of activists established Minho Park Association. Then Minhocão, really like Parque Minhocão was established, and from Friday evening until Monday morning, there were already hours where Minhocão, the highway, was closed for the cars and open for the people. So it really became a public place, the open zone, one of the most democratic also space in the city, because São Paulo is also a huge megapolis, knowing paradoxically with the lack of the public places. There are parks, but it's always hard to get there. Not very good public transportation situation, not really good communication between zones. So Parque Minhocão became this boat where all people started to be there. So that's how it looked during the weekend, during week, and this during the weekend, where people explore it as with a different place, as I say, right? The affordances from the different characteristics. As for the Shanghai, we don't have so much time. As the Shanghai, there is a different situation because Chinese cities are very different. The way China also face the recent huge development of the cities, of agglomeration, of gentrification, and the steps what, let's say, Shanghai was passing through the urbanity was quite a long story, right? We know what is Imperial China, then the Mao, with the Mao policies, how important the idea of Western Park in Shanghai, because Shanghai, one of this Chinese city which is the most had influence from some Western tradition, and then the last 15 years, especially with the boom of Shanghai Expo, Shanghai became as well as a hub for the different experimentation in an urban sense. And Shanghai Red Town, Hongfang, which was built in, which was appeared, let's say, in 2005, was one of these first example of art cluster there. It was a abandoned steel factory, and then together with 3 actors at the government, business, and the cultural development company called Red Town, this art industrial creative zone appeared and became as successful in a design and creative industry, creative economy situation. But for me, it was like the history of the Red Town was 12 years, right? And for me, it was interesting actually that small green zone, because that was a real public place in that sense, in framework of Red Town, right? How people use place there, what people did there, right? So those ideas of space and place, where there was this space, as Stephen Gold says, in landscape or taskscape, right? And how it became a production of place or didn't become, because Shanghai Red Town in the city context, in the urbanity, was one of the first example, but never became actually a place what we see in contrary with Minhocão, which started at the highway and one of the most ambitious urban project in Latin America. And what we see right now from 70s until now, it became as this public place. And state of play, one of the idea which I think quite important in terms of my research, and maybe also bring into the urban urbanity or the urban context, because it signifies a use of public place, manners of interaction, public ceremony conditioned by the arising of utilitarian public place. And as a Dutch scholar, which I refer, Huizinga, says, dedicated his book in Homo Ludens about play, saying that play is actually much beyond the just the leisure, right? Because it shows the boundaries between city and people, space and people and their relationship, and that according to fixed rules what exists in a public place, right? It's ordinarily promotes the formation of the social grouping. Also, one of my methods in research is, of course, case studies, phenomenology. I refer to Bergen and Luhmann, and showing this interaction between space and people and involvement of the place, and explaining the phenomena of arising of the places. One of those on my theoretical framework is affordances. I mentioned already, refer to Gibson and Tim Gold, conducting this interdisciplinary approach from computer science, from design history, theory, and like reflecting the idea of landscape and taskscape, right? And how this city, I would say, experience organize the living environment. Visual anthropology, as I said, is quite important for me as the data gathering, data analysis with participant observations, semi-structured interviews, and yeah, where I define like play as a leisure, and the photographic anthropology in this case. So this is my cases of Shanghai and Sao Paulo, where I did numerous exhibitions and performing art practices within the both cities. So to conclude, I would say that I discovered that the state of play highlights the vitality of play, that public places as spaces is also needs to be readable as a public in order to succeed. And Parque Minhocão could be seen as a taskscape because it changed over time with the people, and the Red Town could be seen as a landscape where human activity was intended to take place, yet as a landscape it fails to co-evolve with the activities. So in my conclusion, I would say the idea of play attributed the activities developed in Minhocão and Red Town the two central aspects, that the fact that its definition and motion in dispute, and the playful characteristic of the activity that it contains, mostly related to the to places. But on one hand, we trace the Parque Minhocão as reveals and managed to keep the signs of human presence as long as the Red Town, even as disappearing project, but portrayed as a commercial art cluster, but having the elements and characteristic of public place and play, and became a significant example of a Shanghai public place. Thank you very much for your attention.
I hope that the audience.
Yes, I just need to be allowed to share screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. 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 Can people hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, yes, we
Hello?
can hear you. Yes.
And I don't hear anyone too. Hello?
Hola Luisa, si te escucho.
Okay, I don't hear anything myself, but okay. Okay, you hear me. Okay, that's okay. I don't have to listen to myself. All right, I'll start. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm actually really excited to do this and to share with you the stuff that I've been working on. I'm still a student at the University of Ottawa, like I'm doing my master's. And so this is an incompleted work, but I thought I would like to share with you where I'm at and also gather any tips and information from the experts to see how can this be improved. So I began my research asking these questions: are megacities ideal urban models? I wanted to prove by doing this research that big cities were actually, just as it attracted the rich, the wealthy, it attracted the poor, but it just, while it gave them opportunities to get ahead, it also created a lot of inequalities. And I was thinking in my head that perhaps the smaller cities would be just a solution for development. So what I did was try to understand the advantages and disadvantages of megacities. And I focused on the economic, the environment, social life, inequalities, and informal settlements. I'm not going to talk in detail about that because what I thought was most interesting was what happened after during my literary review. So in my review, I found the following things: that poorly governed cities actually create unfavorable conditions for everyone. So for the rich, the middle class, and the poor. Also that informality, inequality, environmental degradation, and poor economic development is directly related to governance. Also that good governance is key to raise vulnerable citizens out of poverty. And to my content, I guess, the size of the city is not completely irrelevant, since it does affect different variables and different income groups in different ways. So after that, my literature review findings, I realized that, well, I probably have to change a little bit my perspective. So I made a switch on my, sorry, it's not going to the next slide. Oh, there, sorry, to my research questions. So this is what I'm at. So my first research question is, what do these do, particularly Bogota, in terms of top-down institutionalized decision-making mechanisms for the provision of essential public services? And my second question is, how do bottom-up institutionalized mechanisms in big cities, particularly Bogota, engage citizens' participation in decision-making with regards to the provision of essential public services? As you can see, I'm trying to go from the top to the bottom in the decision-making process, as well as from the bottom to the top in the decision-making process. What happens and who makes the decisions in Bogota. So, sorry, before I go to the next one, I realized that I needed to go a little more in depth on what governance was. And so I really liked the research of, her name is Victoria Munevar, and she basically broke it down in what she had found over in the literature for the past 50 years, actually, on what is governance, right? So she found that there's although in Spanish, like the term governance or gobernanza is a relatively new since like 10 years ago. The concept has always existed there. And these are the different acceptions so far. So either as a step from an state-centered perspective, from a polycentric perspective, neo-Marxist perspective, or a global governance perspective. So to summarize this, is basically the different ways that governance can be understood, right? So whether or not is the state that is at the center, whether it's just multiple actors, the state, civil society, private sector, for example, or is a power game of who is going to get the most, or maybe because of a global pressure to the cities, right? And what she did is that she had her own definition of governance. So we're going to read it together. It says, governance is the realization of political relations between various actors involved in the process of deciding, executing, evaluating decisions on matters of public interest, a process that can be characterized as a power game, in which competition and cooperation coexist as possible rules, and that includes institutions both formal and informal. The form and interaction between the various actors, it reflects the quality of the system and affects each of its components, as well as the system as a whole. So a lot of information here, but I really like how this was also described in this image. So here we see governance, governability, and government. Sometimes we think that governance is governability, and it's not. So governance is a much more vast concept that actually encompasses not just the actions of the government to achieve their ends, but like the other actors around it. But okay, so as I was doing this research, I realized that there was something missing, especially because most of the literature on governance is usually from Western authors. And I felt that that something was missing. And I think that there is some of that in the Latin American authors that I consulted. I hadn't had a chance to do African authors yet, but at least there were a few things that came up. So one is, yes, international actors and the importance of international context, the national international context in the city. And as we can see, like, I mean, in the previous descriptions, we had international, like global actors, and this could be definitely like something that, an interaction that happens in any urban state. But then I want to invite you to also let us think about what is urban governance also in developing countries. And this is where it gets really interesting, because so far, I do not think that we have developed urban governance projects that target the actual governance issues in developing countries. And I give some examples here. So like the main one is corruption. Corruption, it's cities, it's something that lives and we breathe it all the time. And then the national influences, at least in Colombia, we have the guerrilla, the paramilitary, for example. We have local influences, gangs, drug lords, and the drug lords can also be a national influence. And then the international influence also are different in developing countries, because we have, well, multinationals, not so much, because they do are multinationals, so they're everywhere. But the international NGOs, and although like we know how important the work of NGOs is to the development of a city, there's a huge problem sometimes, and I think that needs to also be addressed. And I think there's some authors as well addressing this, which is the fact that when it comes to governance, accountability is super important. So if the international NGOs don't have projects that actually sort of end up giving the authority to the local governance systems, then they lose their ability to be accountable to the people that they're being elected to. And so we have a disparity of, you know, a local government that is sort of being elected, but has like no say sometimes on the projects and the things that are happening because of these international actors sort of acting in their own territory. And I know there's a lot of literature now trying to prevent that by having international NGOs working with local governments, and that's great. But it's still, I don't think it's always the case. And I can say this by personal experience, where I've been doing field work in Bogota for the past few months, and I've talked to a lot of local government actors, and none of them has seen any international aid collaboration with themselves. So at least in the case of Bogota, in the local structure. There has not been any interaction between any NGO that supposedly what I have understand as well, and we can do a lot more research there, is the amount of projects that international organizations have in Colombia and in Bogota. But I was very surprised to hear that at least the local governance system imposed in Bogota has not seen any of that aid per se. Then we have terrorism and ideological pressures. There is a network in Latin America of ideologies that are moved, and that also creates a huge pressure. So I guess my invitation here is so that we take a look at governance in developing countries as something that is seen and is studied, taking into account the actual problems that the people are encountering. I looked at some governance theories, but all of them, again, stay within the framework of the West. So I'm not gonna bore you with this because it's very technical. But I did wanted to look at UN Habitat's approach to urban governance, and they have a number of projects, but it's still what I found that none of them, I mean, these are the different initiatives that they had for urban governance, but none of them actually address the problems I just mentioned before, like corruption, guerrillas, or any of this. So, and then this is what I mean by that. This is their work on urban governance specifically, and the projects that they're carrying out have this framework. And as you can see, they are normative actions, technical components, advocacy actions, knowledge and capacity development component, and sub areas of governance stream. And all of this, if we go into depth, there is very little on like what really developing countries need. Okay, just to almost ending here, we need to include in our study of urban governance theories, like how do we address nepotism, cronyism, clientelism, and other like ills in our society. There's very little on that. So I think that there's a lot of room for growth in urban governance specifically. And so I propose that we analyze international development projects that are set to be targeting urban governance and by different agencies like Global Affairs Canada, USAID, the World Bank, IMF, and others. Try to see if there are any best practices there from successful urban governance stories that have achieved actual good governance. And finally, I just want to say that context-specific analysis of best governance models for cities in developing countries ought to derive from a combination of academic and territorial research, so that in practice projects are designed to strengthen governability and improve the governance of cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luisa. I'm sure your research is very useful for us to understand how urban theories are tended to understand the challenges faced by developing countries. And we can, of course, apply those theories on the African context, so we can understand the challenges, the political and the environmental and the social challenges, as you said. I'm sure that we will have many questions to try to go further in this direction to understand the comparison between mega cities and global cities, as I'm a researcher on global cities. So I would like to have some questions and exchanges with you. But before I move to the last presentation by our colleague Herman Ciara, you're welcome and thank you for attending our conference. And of course, everyone here will be pleased to hear you and to learn from your research.
No, muchas gracias por la invitación. Me gustaría poder compartir pantalla para presentarles mi presentación.
Germán, I have your presentation. Do you want me to share it? ¿Quieres con presentación?
Por favor, sí, no me han permitido ahora en este momento compartir la presentación.
Listo, yo te la comparto.
I think Luisa will share with us the presentation.
Ah, no, creo que ya está subiendo. Ya. Bueno, básicamente la presentación la he titulado Construcción de ciudadanía urbana y su impacto en el logro de los objetivos estratégicos en Bogotá. Básicamente, parte del trabajo que he venido realizando en el trabajo con la firma de consultoría, que nace como una fundación que trabajaba en temas de cultura ciudadana y construcción de ciudadanía, tenía el propósito de lograr contribuir en la solución de problemas públicos en los cuales el rol del ciudadano y el papel de las personas consideradas individual y colectivamente es determinante para lograr objetivos de ciudad, para que haya una gobernanza, para que el gobierno logre sus objetivos y la ciudadanía también logre sus objetivos. Básicamente encuentro que hay tres características principales de las ciudades. La primera es que son asentamientos humanos con gran densidad poblacional, donde convergen múltiples actividades. Adicionalmente, las ciudades, a pesar de ser entornos urbanos, digamos, realmente son escenarios muy complejos en los cuales los ciudadanos y las personas se ven abocadas a abordar diferentes retos en su vida cotidiana. Y en tercer lugar, la solución a los problemas públicos en los entornos urbanos y en las ciudades no solamente depende de un adecuado uso de las herramientas políticas o administrativas, financieras, la asignación de recursos y el adecuado uso del recurso humano por parte de la administración pública. También se necesitan acciones propias como la planeación, el seguimiento, la evaluación, pero uno de los componentes más importantes para garantizar el desarrollo urbano y el desarrollo de las ciudades es que haya una apropiación ciudadana por parte de los objetivos de ciudad. Es decir, si no todos construimos condiciones para que haya seguridad ciudadana, si no todos participamos efectivamente en las diferentes instancias o mecanismos de participación, si nosotros no buscamos asumir hábitos y conductas sostenibles, difícilmente vamos a lograr llegar a esos grandes temas como la seguridad, como la sostenibilidad ambiental, porque finalmente el gobierno no puede hacer todo por los ciudadanos. Respecto a esto, yo he destacado 6 grandes objetivos. Obviamente hay muchos grandes objetivos por parte para las grandes ciudades, pero creo que hay 6 que son determinantes. En primer lugar, toda gran ciudad quiere tener un sistema de transporte eficiente. En segundo lugar, quieren tener fortalecimiento del aparato productivo para generar riqueza y generar empleo. En tercer lugar, tienen que contar con mecanismos de participación ciudadana que sirvan a la ciudadanía, no solamente para los periodos electorales, sino para participar en la toma de decisiones en la vida cotidiana. En un cuarto lugar, las condiciones adecuadas en materia de seguridad ciudadana, convivencia ciudadana e intrafamiliar. Una ciudad que garantice seguridad ciudadana, convivencia ciudadana e intrafamiliar es una ciudad que está logrando un objetivo estratégico de principal valor. El quinto tema es sistemas educativos fuertes que propendan por el desarrollo individual y colectivo. Una ciudad que no ofrezca oportunidades de formación en los distintos niveles, orientado a la promoción del desarrollo individual y colectivo, creo que no está logrando su propósito. Y finalmente, toda ciudad grande quiere sistemas de acueducto, alcantarillado, saneamiento y gestión de residuos. Óptimo. Ahora, seleccioné estos 6 temas porque me parece importante destacar y voy a evidenciar, digamos, cuáles son los principales retos que ciudades como Bogotá tienen frente a esos 6 grandes temas. En primer lugar, los sistemas de transporte. En Bogotá hemos tenido un problema y es que no hemos tenido la capacidad como sociedad, desde los diferentes actores políticos y sociales, de tener un punto de convergencia en el que pensemos que el sistema de transporte es de todos. Entonces, falta esa como resultado de esta falta de unidad de propósito, hace cerca de 20 años se instauró un BRT, Bus Rapid Transport System, con el que se buscaba dar solución a los problemas de movilidad de Bogotá, el Transmilenio. Inicialmente se pactaron cerca de 7 fases para garantizar que el sistema llegara a toda la ciudad. Posteriormente empezamos a construirlo, salió el alcalde que estaba, Enrique Peñalosa, que fue el que lo creó, y solamente hemos llegado, después de 20 años, solamente hemos llegado a la fase número 3. Todo después de unos problemas grandes de corrupción y problemas que no nos han permitido garantizar el acceso del sistema de Transmilenio en importantes sectores de la ciudad. Otro elemento que nos afecta en el tema del transporte es el ejercicio de la protesta social. Aunque parezca un tema aparte, en nuestro país la protesta social poco a poco ha venido adquiriendo una dinámica de expresión violenta que ha venido afectando los bienes públicos y los bienes privados. Pero especialmente la protesta social se ha concentrado en la obstrucción de vías, en el vandalismo y la destrucción de las instalaciones y los elementos que componen el sistema de transporte. Para el 18 de mayo del presente año, en el paro nacional, teníamos cerca de 53 estaciones fuera de servicio, de un total de 138, 8 estaban en cierre parcial. De los 2.357 buses del sistema, 660 tuvieron afectaciones afectaciones físicas, y de los buses zonales, que también forman parte del sistema, se aproxima que se calculaba para ese momento, después la cifra creció, que 404 habían sufrido daños, siendo 5 buses totalmente incinerados. Entonces, tener un sistema de transporte requiere del compromiso de todos los actores sociales. Quienes promueven las marchas difícilmente hacen algo para promover el respeto por estos logros de ciudad. Quería mostrarles las imágenes de lo que ha pasado. Se destruyen los buses de Transmilenio, han acabado con CAIs y estaciones de policía y han destruido portales. Entonces, un bus de Transmilenio es el que vemos en la primera imagen. Posteriormente vemos un CAI, que es un centro de atención inmediata de la policía, totalmente destruido. Y en la tercera imagen vemos el portal de Suba. Es un portal donde llegan todas las estaciones, todas las rutas de una troncal, y es muy importante porque la localidad de Suba es muy grande. Habemos más de 2 millones de personas habitando este sector. Inhabilitaron y destruyeron este portal. Entonces, el rol del ciudadano, sin lugar a dudas, es determinante para lograr consolidar los objetivos de ciudad. Respecto al segundo tema, el aparato productivo, generación de riqueza, oportunidades de progreso y empleo, sin lugar a dudas la informalidad genera unas afectaciones grandes. Cuando las personas deciden sacar adelante emprendimientos en el marco de la informalidad, generan unas afectaciones para el acceso a la salud, a la pensión y a la calidad de vida de muchos trabajadores. Y eso también en gran medida va en parte de la responsabilidad ciudadana. Obviamente el Estado, en sus carteras de desarrollo económico, de promoción de emprendimientos, deben incentivar este tipo de proyectos, pero el rol del ciudadano que decide jugar y cumplir con las normas es determinante. Además, tenemos dinámicas grandes de contrabando, en las cuales muchos ciudadanos prefieren ir y pagar un producto mucho más barato, evadiendo impuestos y generando un apoyo a las cadenas delictivas que realizan contrabando, en lugar de comprar en almacenes legales. Y, digamos, la generación de cultura de emprendimiento, sin lugar a dudas, es un reto compartido. Y creo que este es un rol en el que la ciudadanía, con todos sus múltiples actores, debe jugar un papel determinante, porque finalmente el progreso no se puede lograr solamente con acciones de gobierno. Respecto a los mecanismos e instancias de participación ciudadana, en Bogotá las personas no participan, casi no participan. Para poner un ejemplo, en la última elección de la alcaldesa mayor, tuvimos un evidente desinterés por la participación. Votaron cerca del 55.3% de las personas habilitadas. Esto representa 3.219.343 personas votaron de un universo total de 5.850.000 1.035 personas habilitadas. Finalmente, como tenemos un sistema electoral de mayoría simple, gana la alcaldesa local, la alcaldesa con el 35% de los votos, que es un 35% que no es del 100% del electorado, sino el 35% del 55% que efectivamente acudió a las urnas. Entonces, ese desinterés por la participación política y por elegir a quienes van a promover planes de desarrollo para el bienestar de la sociedad, sin lugar a dudas, también es algo que nos está afectando mucho. Perdón. Y con nuestra experiencia hemos aprendido que en Bogotá hay varias instancias de participación. Hay unos consejos de planeación local, hay diferentes consejos consultivos para temas de la administración distrital. Bogotá está dividida en 20 localidades, 20 alcaldías menores y una gran alcaldía mayor. La alcaldesa mayor es la que les acabo de decir que elegimos, que se eligió en la ciudad, y las otras 20 alcaldías son electas por parte del alcalde, quien las designa. Sin embargo, pues este resultado y en cada uno de estos espacios tenemos unas instancias en las que también se han replicado algunas prácticas que sería bueno no tener, pero que la ciudadanía misma las consolida. Entonces, liderazgos consolidados que obstaculizan el aparecimiento o la creación o la generación de nuevos liderazgos. Se replican lógicas de poder político en los espacios de participación e instancias ciudadanas. Se utilizan como plataforma para objetivos políticos y de grupo, más que para los temas objetivos de cada una de las instancias de participación, si es ambiental, si es social, si es de incidencia local. Entonces, ahí también la ciudadanía tiene un papel importante para garantizar que estos mecanismos funcionen. Ahora, en materia de seguridad ciudadana, convivencia ciudadana e intrafamiliar, destacar que en Bogotá se ha generado una economía delictiva, una economía que promueve el delito mediante la compra de objetos robados. Son múltiples los operativos que ha tenido que adelantar la administración y los diferentes gobiernos para desarticular bandas que se dedican a robar, reparar y comercializar celulares, por ejemplo, bicicletas. Y finalmente esto ha generado unas afectaciones en la seguridad ciudadana muy grandes que finalmente resultan siendo respaldadas por la misma ciudadanía, con un ejercicio irresponsable y una compra de objetos robados. La intolerancia en la vía pública, el servicio de transporte, en los escenarios de vecindad, hay múltiples casos de intolerancia, porque subió el volumen, porque lo frenó, porque no le dio la vía, porque iba muy despacio en la vía, por cualquier cosa se han generado afectaciones que incluso han ocasionado la pérdida de la vida de muchas personas. Entonces, esta aceptación cultural de este tipo de matices de violencia, sin lugar a dudas, tiene un arraigo en la ciudadanía, que es la que tiene que cambiar y generar nuevas dinámicas de civismo, de construcción de ciudadanía, para poder avanzar en la consolidación de mejores condiciones para la ciudad. Como quinto, los sistemas educativos que propendan por el desarrollo. Aquí es importante decir que sin lugar a dudas, la administración distrital, la administración nacional, hacen esfuerzos ingentes por garantizar una oferta adecuada en términos de calidad, en términos de cobertura. Sin embargo, a pesar de que el sector público y el sector privado ofrecen múltiples alternativas, también hay un rol y hay un papel de la ciudadanía. Yo creo que no todo se lo puede dejar al gobierno. Y es que falta compromiso individual con la formación. Hay personas que desestiman mucho el estudio y que tienen una cultura del corto plazo. Personas que, ¿para qué estudiar 5 años si yo ya puedo salir a vender algo en la calle o cosas así? Y digamos que abandonan estas grandes apuestas. Obviamente hay que atender a las necesidades del día a día, pero digamos que hay muchísimas personas que han venido dejando y desertando de los sistemas de formación, no solamente por falta de oportunidades, sino porque ya no se cree que realmente la educación sea esa llave que nos va a abrir las puertas a mejores oportunidades para nuestro desarrollo de plan de vida. Y sin lugar a dudas, un clásico, la microcorrupción que se presenta cuando las personas realizan plagio, desde el nivel de primaria, bachillerato, en cualquier lugar. ¿Qué clase de profesionales estamos formando? Son personas que seguramente lograrán sus requisitos académicos, obtendrán un título, obtendrán un trabajo, pero difícilmente van a contribuir en la relación, en la solución real a grandes problemas de la sociedad o al crecimiento y el desarrollo del aparato productivo de nuestro país. En sexto lugar, los sistemas de acueducto y alcantarillado, saneamiento y gestión de residuos. Mucho se habla de la sostenibilidad ambiental. Todo el mundo habla de que tenemos que tener sistemas de recolección de basuras que garanticen una adecuada separación de residuos. Sin embargo, aquí es importante destacar que para que haya realmente una política de sostenibilidad ambiental, se necesita el compromiso de los ciudadanos. La responsabilidad personal en la separación de la fuente, en la reducción, en la reutilización, en el reciclaje, no arrojar basura en los sistemas de drenaje. Es algo bastante importante y es un rol que 8 millones de personas hacen mal, pues son 8 millones de personas sumándole a un problema. Y en quinto lugar, y otro elemento es que, digamos, los administradores de los conjuntos o de la expropiedad horizontal no siempre trabajan los temas de separación en la fuente y no están articulados con asociaciones de recuperadores para garantizar que todo este material sea recuperado y haya una posibilidad no solamente de sostenibilidad, sino que miles de familias tengan acceso a unos recursos, porque finalmente eso no es basura, esos son recursos que se pueden utilizar, aprovechables en su gran mayoría para múltiples propósitos. Y un elemento importantísimo es el uso responsable del agua, a nivel individual y corporativo. Son muchos los casos en los que se ha visto que el uso del agua no es el más adecuado y finalmente esto puede generar afectaciones ambientales en el corto, mediano y largo plazo. Ya para concluir, quería decir que hemos entendido la construcción de ciudadanía como un proceso de educación continuo, mediante el cual se fortalecen las capacidades de los ciudadanos para abordar desafíos individuales y colectivos con un sistema de valores compartidos y con unidad de propósito. Creo que si no avanzamos en la consolidación de herramientas de capacitación para todos y cada uno de los ciudadanos desde sus diferentes roles, no vamos a lograr consolidar una unidad de propósito que nos permita hacer frente a los desafíos colectivos.
Do you hear me? Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Tonton. So, Herman, thank you so much for your presentation. And as I said, I believe that we will have many questions because we can create many linkages between your presentation and Luisa's presentation about urban spaces theories and the case of Bogota. So I will invite the attendees to start to discuss with us and maybe to open the discussion. I have a question to my colleague Luisa. She talks about the perspective, the governance perspective, and she mentioned the neo-Marxist perspective and the state perspective. And I'm wondering if we have also a neoliberal perspective, because starting with the Washington consensus, we noticed that this consensus was impacted very much the way that we perceive the role of states in the construction of places and the role of private sector in promoting the well-being in urban spaces. So do you have any idea how this neoliberal perspective has impacted during the past decades the way we defined our politics and strategies in urban spaces?
Okay, so can you hear?
You're muted. We can't hear.
No, I will go to tell her.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear. I can hear now.
Sorry, so I can't hear anyone.
Yes, I can hear now.
I don't understand. Yeah. No, Herman, if you can remove the share screen, let's see. You can hear me now, Professor Cao? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just me. I can't hear you. So, okay. No, I was saying that that I would definitely to take a deeper dive into the different implications of the different political ideologies in how urban governance has taken place in developing countries, but definitely the urban sorry, neoliberalism has definitely implicated, I mean, taken root in how our governments are shaped. But definitely, that's something that I need to look more into it. But sorry, I am gonna end it there. Sorry.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you so much. I invited the attendees if they have like some questions or if they would like to add something to this question about the neoliberal perspective and how this perspective has impacted the way that we define our policies and strategies. If there's no question, maybe.
Yeah, I have a question.
For,
Yeah. Hello, I have a question.
Herman, about his presentation. He mentioned and he focused on the institutional challenges that people in urban spaces are facing, and these challenges are impacting the faith and the trust between people and the institution, public organization. So my question, in Bucharest case, how or what the suggestion that you will propose, for example, to improve the quality of the interactions between people and the public institutions, so will improve this relations or the political inclusiveness of people in urban spaces?
Actually, I think that our country have a lot of problems, but one of the most critical is the political division, because there are two sides, opposite sides that want to govern, and then all of them justify every action, everything. That doesn't matter if it means to destroy the urban system, transport, or the property, anything. And I think that we must find and build some idea of common interest that permit us keep moving and advancing in the construction of better relations. Actually, the government also commits some mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but the citizenship need to act in a very more responsible way. And that's something that is possible only if we start assuming the citizenship education as an objective of our nation. We don't think that values can be important. Everyone thinks anything about what is important, and that is killing us, because we need to share some values understand the importance of respect, honor, be proactive, and help another people and respect another people, another dreams, another ideas, another perspectives. And if we don't have this change of mind about the education, we are going to fight and fight and fight always. And everything will be a scenario for the fight. As I could show you, everything in the city, it was destroyed some months ago. And who is talking about it? There are actually there are a lot of bus station transport that are useful, and the government haven't repaired it. Why? Because they know that the people who is in the street can go and break it again and again and again and again. And the society must be quiet, looking how these kind of people do whatever they want, and we don't have a system value that we can share.
Thank you, Herman, for your answer. And I was thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on many countries, and I have seen some examples in Africa, and how some governments has used this pandemic as an opportunity to create more linkages between them and people in informal economy. In Morocco, for example, it was the case, and in other countries also. Professor Kawa, I think he would like to answer to this question, or maybe to add some comments or questions. So, Professor Kawa, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. And first, thank you, Chairman, to share your presentation, your research with us. And since we have, especially I have very limited knowledge about Spanish, so I couldn't understand a lot, but just with science, I think you did a great job. And also it reminded me that I needed to study more Spanish. Okay, so my question is mostly for Luisa. And I think Luisa did very good progress on her thesis, preparing her thesis. And my question is about, and because Luisa has want to study two decision mechanism. One is top to down, another bottom to top. And you see, this is always the discussion, which is better, which is not better. But anyway, in my personal opinion, I think we need to have both. But my question is most for Luisa. So I think, yeah, you don't have the answer yet, but just with all the literature review, what in your mind, how this kind of approach, or each approach can be played a role in the decision making.
Thank you, Professor Kao, for that question and support. So yes, from so far what I've studied, I think that yes, I agree with you that we need both. We just need to definitely, when we talk about, because when you have both, you are implicitly talking about decentralization, which means that you're going to have like the top powers will need to definitely share some of their power, which also means budget, with the other authorities, right? And with the people itself. Like so, for example, in the case of Bogota, I think they have, in paper speaking, a fairly good model for political participation, but it's imperfect in many ways in practice. And one of the things that I, for example, thought it was very shocking was that the percentage allotted in the participatory budget was extremely small compared to what it was centralized, right? And so what ended up happening is that you have, yes, all these mechanisms for participation at the local level. As Herman was saying, we have 20 localidades, or small sectors, and each one of them has imbued in there a participatory mechanism that is both volunteered and at the same time elected. So two different bodies, and they sort of are both accountable to the mayor that has been we have the, what is it called, the mayor of the city, and then we have 20 little mayors of the localidades, right? So those like participatory instruments are trying to make accountable the little mayor. I'm calling it the little mayor because I can't think of the English word right now, but it's supposed to work well in the way that the people are trying to tell them what they need. But because it's such a small percentage of the budget, when they have this exercises of participatory budget, they cannot decide on really important things. And I give you an example. One of these localities had a wall that was collapsing, and it required a huge amount of budget for that. And that was what the citizens needed in that localidad for their well-being, because that meant, well, the houses on top of that wall were going to get destroyed, and also the ones at the bottom. But even though they expressed those concerns, that wasn't enough in their budget to cover that. So what they end up doing is like little things such as like local gardens, which I know they're important, but it is not a priority in their local. So I find that we need to trust more the people's voice, but also train them. And another example of like lack of participation or like a poor participation was in another localidad. They had majority of the population is elderly, and they used to have, this is small participatory budget, they used to vote for activities for the elderly for their well-being, like being able to go to the pool or having like somebody to come to their houses to help them with their elderly needs. And because of COVID-19, they had to transfer all of that digitally. But as we know, the elderly are the ones who have the most challenges with like with the technology. So then what happened last year is that the elderly, because they were not able to participate in that exercise, they lost their budget. So most of it went for the care of animals, which again, these are localities where like sewage, electricity, like basic services are still not provided. So it is a pity that, and I had many, I can give you more examples of roads and things. So I do think that there is an opportunity to improve the governance system. But also, as I said in my presentation, I think it's very important that we start thinking about and working, for example, with criminologists. Like, how do we actually end violence? Like, how do we end corruption? How do we tackle those issues, and that development projects actually target those? Because without those, like, no matter how beautiful your structure is, it's never gonna go anywhere. And I really like what Herman said in his presentation, because his focus is on educating individuals to have a civil conscience, to actually protect their own things and not destroy them, which is what happened this past few months, where so many, as he showed, so many buses and stations were destroyed out of a protest, and cities, government officials don't want to fix them because they know they're going to be destroyed again. So you have a cycle of like, if the money is there, the willingness sometimes is there, but the people themselves need to value their own city and want to take care of it, and that requires a huge work of education. So I think there's a lot of work to do, no matter where you look at it. And that's all I'm going to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you so much, Luisa. I think, as you said, there is no magical solution to find new alternatives for the challenges that people face in urban spaces. I think we are in a process of experimentation, and we need the two mechanisms. I mean, top-down and down-top mechanism. And the dilemma is to know when should we use the top-down mechanism and the down-top mechanism. As in the case of China, for example, 4 decades ago, we need a centralized state with the power to establish an efficient strategies and politics. But with the improvement of the quality of life of people, you need to ensure the inclusiveness of people in the political arena, for example, so you will understand their needs, and you will be able to include them in your decision process. I think we have all of us enjoyed your presentations, and thank you so much for giving us your time, and personally, and I think the attendees also learned a lot of information and new knowledge from your research. Of course, we'll be pleased to continue with you, and in 2023 in Africa, we will of course discuss about those challenges, and I hope after the era of COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Okay.
Okay, keep in touch.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.